Research and documentation of historic properties is both a craft and an art. The craft of piecing together information and the art of interpreting what you've found. The research process is fundamental to preservation and interpretation and involves critical reading and writing skills as well as sometimes a bit of luck. There are a variety of sources you can consult when you are trying to piece together the history of a building or other historic structure. Of course, the current or former owner can be an invaluable source of information. You can consult architectural resources such as the records of a construction or architectural firm. Builders' catalogs are a great source of information, also really cool to look at, especially for domestic structures. And you can look at pattern books, such as this is the page on the right, is a page from a pattern book, or even Sears home catalogs. You can reference these for design and style as well as house form, and many include detailed floor plans and even notes on ornamentation. Local history sources are also can be a really great source of information, like local newspapers, both feature stories as well as real estate ads. You can find notices for auctions and stories on important builders or projects, development projects that are going on. And also local and county histories, which were very prevalent and popular in the 20th century, can provide information about places and important people and are much more likely to have very specific details about local affairs than, say, other kinds of sources. They also often contain maps and photographs or other kinds of etchings and drawings of the ways things looked in the past. The U.S. Census is also an important resource. You can obtain detailed address-by-address information from the U.S. Census up until 1940. Here I've called up one page from the census for Avondale Estates, a suburban community east of Decatur. Census records provide information about homeownership, whether you were renting or owning, class status by virtue of occupation, and also living arrangements in the home. So here, before you saw the picture of the Avondale houses, and then these are the streets that those houses are located on, Fairfield Drive and Exeter Road. And you can see as you scroll down that there are particular heads of households and then members of the family. Their relationship to one another is noted, as are their places of origin, their ages, their race. And then if you scroll farther over, you can also see their occupations of them, where they're employed, and their spouses, and where their parents are from. So why is this interesting? Well, it's interesting so we can say here that in Avondale Estates at this time, we can reconstruct, we can see, well, there are salesmen, architects, professors, commercial agents. We know that this is basically a middle-class community. We know that it's basically a predominantly white community since almost all of the residents are white, with the exception of a few line items where we see that the resident is black. And in this case, both of these cases, it's a maid or a servant. So this also tells us that in the living arrangements of these homes, these single-family homes, we also would have had sometimes rooms for live-in servants as well. Other kinds of documents, property documents, always very important. So for instance, you might see deeds of ownership indicating property transfers, sales, whether the home was owned, the building was owned by more than one person or a corporation and so forth. And also there are surveys and plat maps that are done. Wills and inventories will also, any of these kinds of probate records will show itemized goods owned by the estate. And in this case, you can see details on furniture, other household goods indicating lifeways. Sometimes inventories will go room by room in a house. And so you can not only reconstruct what furniture was in each room, but also what that room was used for, what kinds of activities took place there. And this is an example of a plat map. These are always linked numerically to property records. So if there are deeds and other records located in a county courthouse, for instance, then you would also be able to reference those through the plat maps. So this will just show you this is on Claremont Avenue in Atlanta, and you can see all of the structures that are along here. This is in fact a Plat Map, and this property is in fact a commercial property, a restaurant. Um, so again, Plat Maps tied to property records, usually at the county level. Other kinds of maps, atlases, city maps, of course, can provide detailed information and indicate when street names have changed over time and so forth. One unique resource, mostly from the 19th and very early 20th century, are city panoramas. These are lithographs, engravings, which portray a bird's eye view of cities at particular moments in time. Here we have one for 1892 in Atlanta. And if we zoom in on that, we can locate the state capitol, a couple of railroad roundhouses that were used for managing the railroad. And you can see how important the railroad is for the city of Atlanta during this time. We can also locate the state capitol, other prominent buildings. Here's Decatur Street, here's Gilmer Street, Edgewood, and then of course down here we have the terminal train station. You can also see Piedmont Park is not existing yet, right? We have a detail for Ponce de Leon Avenue here. And then you see it here, right here. So, and you can also get a sense of really how much green space there was in Atlanta during this time, and also specific structures noted on this panorama. So if you look up close, you can actually reconstruct what streets and areas looked like at this time. This is another panorama for 1919 in Atlanta. And again, we can zoom in. Here is the area that's at the core of Georgia State University campus right now. We have the Hurt Building, the Georgia Trust Building, as well as a non-existent Woodruff Park, right? The Hurt Building, which is near where the history department is, and then here's the Flatiron Building on Peachtree. So you could definitely, again, get a sense of what are the buildings on each one of the blocks in this city in fairly specific detail if you zero in on these panorama maps. These are also interesting for giving context to a particular structure. You can see where it fits into a particular urban landscape. Another really important map source is Sanborn Maps, which were published by the Sanborn Fire Insurance Company from the mid-1800s to the present day. They show in great detail the street layout and existing buildings in about 12,000 American cities, and they're one of the primary sources that we use for documenting properties. Building information, you can actually access them online through Georgia State Library, and there's a whole database of these fire insurance maps. And this is actually a map, a section of a map from Auburn Avenue, which of course you're familiar with now after your walk. And in particular, we can find Big Bethel Church here at the corner of Auburn and Butler. Now you may be wondering about the color coding. Yellow indicates that the structure is a wood frame, pink is brick, and blue is stone or concrete. So of course Big Bethel Church is made of granite stone, and that's indicated here. And it's interesting because so not only do these maps show you structure by structure what's on any given city street or block, but they also tell you what the building was made out of materially. They might identify roof style, placement of windows, thickness of walls, the height of the building, and even distance from sidewalks, as well as distance from closest water source, because of course this would have also been important information from a point of view of fire insurance. So you can learn a lot from these maps. Another rich source of information, particularly for less documented sites, would be archaeology, and of course this is a more specialized way of researching, but as lay people we can certainly benefit from the fruits and the evidence that's gathered through archaeological excavations. Archaeology is used a lot for structures that are old or no longer extant on the landscape. Generally with archaeology we're talking about two different kinds, prehistoric and historic. And historical archaeology is the one which is most usually used by preservationists. That is archaeology in which you can look at the evidence on the ground in relation to other sources. And that's often applied at historic sites, but also places like burial grounds or other places that need to be reconstructed because they've been lost. There's a lot of these kinds of historic archaeology projects going on around the country. One really important one is at Jamestown. Here we have the 1608 church at Jamestown, Virginia, which has been the site of extensive archaeological activity aimed at reconstructing the lives of less prominent residents of this first colony. Archaeologists searching for a men's barracks in Jamestown, Virginia, found instead the remains of the earliest Protestant church in North America. The team exposed 5 deep post holes spaced 12 feet apart, and records indicate the wooden church, built in 1608, was 60 feet long and was the most prominent building in Jamestown at the time. And in addition to buildings, wells, privies, and other non-residential structures can also provide data about life in the past, either yielding specific household artifacts or helping us understand the relationship of buildings to each other. And this is just some images of archaeological activities and some of the evidence that they found here at Jamestown. Sometimes there's little or no documentation of a structure. Then you need to turn to other forms of historical data. Oral history is perhaps the most frequently utilized in order to recover and preserve memories of places and structures, as well as fill in the gaps that may exist in the historical record. When doing oral histories, we need to be aware of our roles as narrators and interviewers and how they shape the interaction around the interview. We also need to be ethical in our dealings with narrators, ensuring that we've secured informed consent by using release forms. And related to oral history, of course, there's also family history, another rich source of information. And here you can use sites like Ancestry.com to reconstruct the genealogy of specific families, and these include not only birth and death records, but often other kinds of records, draft records, other records related to individuals that can help you reconstruct the story of people who lived at a particular site. Family history can also be an important source of memory and property information. So for things like unofficial transfers of land could be documented through family history, but not exist in other forms of data. Family history can also help us date buildings and their changes, as well as illuminate the relationships between people and the places where they lived.